I know one thing in particular that I did want to talk about was being from so many different paths, or rather, holding so many identities, being oppressed in ways that are so small and so big that it's almost like another trigger just trying to account for the ways you are triggered. Um, Finding love in that atmosphere or in that headspace, in that environment internally is extremely hard. I think the thing about my relationship that I appreciate the most is the fact that my partner is another black person who is woke and who is open to yelling and screaming and fighting about, not fighting, but like yelling and like being just very passionate and emphatic about the ways in which like we are oppressed and things are fucked up. And I appreciate that shit. I think I've never had a partnership with any person before that made me feel just so validated and just so heard. And that's something I so appreciate, but I think at the same time, because I've had so much trauma, because I've endured so many situations where I could not trust people that I had already trusted, I became hostile to people that cared for me because I just didn't believe them. Because I've had people be in my life for very short amount of time, for very short amounts of time, and I've had situations where folks just abandoned me, folks just left me, folks just didn't care about reciprocity or about how I was going to be affected. Just mindlessness. That was just so precarious and left me in such risky and unpredictable situations. When those things happen to you, when someone is genuinely trying to love you, it does not seem so or possible at times. And I think the worst part is like most folks perhaps like that have been very open in trying to find someone to love them. So it's a very fucked up paradigm where you have had a past that was so traumatic that your future actually is in question because you don't really know how to process somebody loving you or someone caring for you because you have been literally tricked, literally played, literally just not taken seriously or taken account of, people being mindless and careless with your life and with like things that are important can kind of put you in a mentality where everything is temporary. So in ways your reactions to things aren't with longevity in mind, aren't with some sort of progression in mind, some sort of relationship in mind. And I think in ways it creates a very harmful and toxic environment. And it's something that I think in ways like I for sure definitely need therapy for, and I definitely am hoping that I can find some sort of spiritual healing as well. But I think it's also important, like pre any diagnosis or help or resources, I'm able to actually talk about it, because I think in this headspace that I'm in right now, it's so hard sometimes because I'll be in the middle of being extremely upset about something that has really nothing to do with why I'm truly upset. And then a lot of times my anger is a mask for some sort of scarcity or poverty trigger or some sort of trigger of just someone not caring for me in a way that I felt I deserved to be cared for. And I think at times it can borderline on ridiculous. It can borderline on not being realistic in terms of my partner and their ability to really hold space for me. Because I think in ways I've learned a lot in a short amount of time, which is awesome. But I think in ways it does set up certain situations to make me be a teacher or some sort of authority, and that's not my nature. I'm not really a person that wants to be instilling my values into you. I think I just try to say how I feel, and I think because I'm assertive, perhaps people take that as like me saying like my way is, you know, wholly right and the only way. But I think because of that, it can be like really hard to kind of explain. I think the ways that it's hard to convey yourself when you kind of speak so bluntly and so squarely. And I think like from time to time I learned that I need to kind of like pause. I think that's one of the main things, is to kind of pause before I kind of like have an anxiety attack and just kind of remind myself, you know, what this moment is, like what's happening in this moment. Because I think that a lot of times when I'm triggered to kind of like lash out, or my abandonment is triggered, or I just feel kind of like and for whatever reason, because it can be irrational, feel kind of disconnected from my partner or not feeling cared for enough. I try to pause and I try to ask myself, you know, what is my partner's headspace? What has my partner gone through today? What has happened to them maybe in their day that makes them perhaps less talkative, less open energetically? And I think that that's the main thing I wanted to say, was about decentering, because that's something that is so needed. I think one of the things that I learned living with other folks who are queer and trans, black folks, people of color, indigenous folks, I learned that if you're not able to decenter yourself, you cannot live with other folks who hold those identities. And that's just how I feel. But I think it's mainly because I noticed in situations where folks were not able to decenter and center the other folks who were in their community, like directly, they were in your community, if they're living under your roof, they're in community with you in so many different ways. Unable to decenter, unable to see why something would be hurtful, something would be seemingly unfair, something would be racist, something that would seem in ways perpetuating rape culture. Folks were unable in ways to kind of decenter themselves from the space, and took up a lot of space trying to, you know, center themselves in things that people were bringing to them as problems, issues, disturbances. And I think for myself, dating a black cis woman, I have to remind myself that yes, I do suffer from anxiety. Yes, I do suffer from PTSD. I do have a lot of trauma around living spaces with other folks, mainly because I've never been able to coexist with other folks without something happening, and me being displaced. And there's been a lot of instances where perhaps the fault was on me, perhaps the fault was on the other person, but over time it's been a situation where houselessness is an issue for me. Houselessness is a trigger for me. Living with people is a trigger. I think one of the things I said to Audrey when we were living together, or rather before we lived together, I said to her, and I think this was the first time I ever said this to anybody, and I think that's like why Denver, the whole situation kind of hurt me, was because I vocalized that I had lived with other folks of color before, and that I had lived with other queer folks before, and that I had lived with queer folks of color before, and that I had been traumatized by living in housing situations that were just not stable. And I had dealt with a lot of houselessness pre-ever moving in with any collective kind of group in mind. And before I ever graduated to this idea of wanting to only live with POC or black folks exclusively. So having housing trauma in my earlier years, and then finally being able to say to someone, I've had housing trauma. I kind of need you to, you know, be aware that certain things might trigger me in this house, such as, you know, when we're I think one of the things I was trying to hammer home with the living in spaces and being triggered with people was I told them that whenever we fought and like they were ignoring me and making me feel kind of isolated or trying to isolate me by giving me the silent treatment, it made me feel extremely triggered because after Jason and I no longer were cool, it was like me and her only had a rapport, and she was the only reason why I lived in the house. So it became really vital that her and I didn't have, you know, a very tumultuous relationship. And so I was trying to explain to her that, you know, the stakes are very high, and I wasn't really trying to place on her the onus to make sure our relationship was always right. But I think in ways I was trying to explain to her that that was something that scared me, that like our relationship was contingent on my housing, and that I didn't want it to be where if we were fighting that she was just going to kick me out. And I think at some point we came up with a actual lease and things like that, but even the lease was shady, y'all. So I think in ways it's awesome that like I was able in that relationship to kind of assert myself, though it didn't really work out. You know, I think it was like awesome, yay, I'm able to say like what's triggering me, what's hurting me, but damn, no one gave a fuck. So back to the drawing boards. And in this relationship, like my partner is like really awesome at just like validating me and reminding me that, you know, capitalism is not the decider of our relationship, and that, you know, we will figure things out together and we will work together to kind of, you know, maintain, you know, having this living space for each other and like and caring for each other and supporting each other. And I think in ways I couldn't have expected that from my roommates, and I never was expecting anything so deep, I suppose, but in ways this situation works out the best because I think if my partner wasn't willing to understand that I've had some really traumatic living experiences and just experiences with houselessness and poverty and just trauma from my parents, my family, I think if I didn't have a partner that understood all those things and was also able to take space to say, you know what, I love you, you're awesome, you know, just reminding me like that they care for me, that they're there for me, and listening to me when I'm just, you know, kind of just rattling off a bunch of things that I've never been able to say because I've never had that safe space. It's very healing and it's very amazing, and I'm just really just blessed and really happy. But it's, again, not without the reality that being traumatized from being a child, growing up in the foster care system, growing up with like my parents being in and out of my life, growing up with my father blaming my mother for our relationship not working because she kept us from him and used child support against him. All these things that I feel like I'm being made to hold on for other people. I think other folks really want me to hold on to their baggage for them and validate that for them. And I think in the case of my father, I definitely told him most recently, you know, I'm sorry and you are validated. It's valid what you're saying. You know, if that's how he feels, that's how he feels. I think like I'm past trying to shut down how people are feeling about things. I think that's just like a really abusive tactic to kind of just dismiss somebody. It's real, you know, it's real as fuck. My relationship with my mother is not the best, not at all. And while I'm not trying to bash her, I can also understand and sympathize with my father for perhaps being manipulated and perhaps not feeling cared for, and perhaps a white passing black woman calling the police on him and being fucking anti-black as fuck and perpetuating anti-blackness within the dynamics of co-parenting, which is not going to work. So it's a situation where I feel like I've just had a lot of just traumatic, wayward occurrences to where it's still hard, still really hard for me to like accept someone caring for me, because I think as much as I'm trying to work through all the things that have happened and all the things that I've endured and experienced, I'm still in ways trying to figure out, you know, what I look like to me. You know what I mean? Because I think sometimes you be so scared to put yourself out there because you have a clear idea of what you see in yourself, and perhaps you don't like that shit, perhaps you're working on that shit, or whatever it is. But I feel like I don't know what I look like. I feel like I'm carrying so much stuff that I feel like I don't even know what it looks like to engage with me or to like be around me, and until I've been dating my partner, Sydney, it's been a situation where I'm really like feeling kind of like, damn, you know, I'm really not, you know, engaging with her in the ways that I want to, and I feel a block and I'm not sure why, and I'm like, I'm kind of trying to antagonize that thought, kind of trying to rather expound upon that feeling, and just more so realizing that my past relationships have set me up to not really be someone's partner, but rather be just, I don't know. And that's what I mean. I feel like all my partnerships have been wayward and they've not been fulfilling for me, and I've not been able to be as honest about who I am with my partner. So now that I'm able to say everything and be every person that I've been in the multiverse, like explaining all the multiverses that I exist in, that is just so, I don't know, it's weird. It's weird now, in ways, and it's in ways it seems like the stakes are higher. It seems like her loving me through all this trauma makes me feel even more distrustful, because I'm like, like, why do you still love me? Like, I've been through so much, and just feeling, I think in ways like kind of feeling like I'm not good enough, or like I'm not healthy enough mentally to be engaging with someone in a relationship romantically, and that's like really scary to admit. And I think in ways, when I talked to my partner about it, I was like just crying my eyes out because I just felt like so useless. And I think in ways, you know, her validating me and her comforting me is also predicated on the fact that, you know, we both are differently abled in different ways. And I think because she suffers from an invisibilized illness that in ways makes her kind of, you know, unable to be functioning as her normal self for, you know, days at a time, her having an experience like that with me witnessing her disability without her ever having to tell me, and me just being there for her and supporting her, you know, I'm sure that in ways that's triggering as fuck too, like to learn that you are differently abled and that your partner is aware of it, and also the distrust that she must feel with me caring for her, and us never really having like long, lengthy conversations prior to that moment about the fact that this was something that was real in her life. And I don't know, I just think this relationship is just an experience in so many ways that I'm just so grateful for, because I feel like I've fallen in love with my best friend, y'all. Like, for real. Like, I love this person, and I just think that she's someone that sees me completely and doesn't make me feel like I'm not just as amazing as, you know, when we first met and she knew nothing about me and she was just intrigued. And I think in ways like living this full life, this full vibrancy, being completely open and honest with my partner is just so refreshing and feels so revitalizing, and obviously like is why I'm having these, you know, instances where I want to figure out ways to be healthier mentally, where I can, you know, be with my partner and perhaps not be, you know, having so many anxiety attacks, or perhaps trying to convey my triggers to my partner in ways that aren't so condescending in ways and just very mean, because in ways I think, as I said, prior relationships, I learned how to speak to my partners in very shady, fucked up ways, and I don't think I ever held myself accountable for the ways that I treated my partners poorly, because I had not been treated right at all by anyone, and perpetuating that to a point where that was my relationship style was just being extremely unhealthy and extremely, I think, sexualized, fetishized. So I think like it just kind of intersected where my partners didn't care that, you know, I was experiencing, mania, or that I was experiencing anxiety. Like, it didn't matter because my partners were sexualizing me, and that's what mattered to them more so than what I was saying or what I was experiencing. But I kind of want to wrap this up. It's a 20-minute video. Cute. I don't know. I just feel kind of like it's so freeing to be able to tell my partner I'm just feeling kind of fucked up about capitalism right now. And for her to not look at me like, what do you mean? And for her to not make me feel like I have to get over it. For her to let me expound truly upon things that do fuck with me is just so important. It feels like so strange that this is the first time I'm ever experiencing this kind of happiness. But at the same time, I'm extremely grateful, and I don't know, I'm just very inspired. I'm very inspired. I have a lot of good people around me. I'm eating some good food, and I'm just like on some other shit right now. I'm just really trying to just experience my trauma in a healthy way. I want to kind of harness the energy from the trauma and kind of just, kind of channel it away from me in positive bursts, because I just feel like it's been such a traumatic time. It's been so many different instances of me feeling just kind of just disillusioned and bereft and just isolated. And it feels really good to know that I'm creating that physical community that I said I wanted. On my birthday last year, I said, not 25, but 24, I was like, I need to get my physical community popping, and that's what it is. And I'm just like, I'm trying to get back to my online folks. I know y'all are out here. I know y'all want to talk. I know y'all want to just like really share and just hold some sort of attendance together, because I know a lot of folks have been hitting me up on the Instagram saying, hey, come back, where you been? And honestly, I've been here. I've just been kind of like just trying to harness my thoughts, trying to just get ready to come back and talk to y'all, because I just feel like every time I turn around, I've got something else going on. But I just wanted to share that this is one of the journeys I'm going through right now. I'm definitely trying to work on my mental health and the way that I respond to people that I care for, or people that I potentially do want to care for. Trying to just work on not treating people like they're temporary, because that's all I've ever known. And that's not easy, but it's not something that's acceptable to me as someone that wants to carry on living and wants to carry on having connections with people. I want them to be genuine, and I want them to be based on love and sweetness and kindness and just reciprocity and understanding. And I don't want it to be based on anything other than that. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Bye. I know one thing in particular that I didn't want to talk about was being from so many different paths, or rather holding so many identities, being oppressed in ways that are so small and so big that it's almost like another trigger just trying to account for the ways you are triggered. Finding love in that atmosphere, or in that headspace, in that environment internally, is extremely hard. I think the thing about my relationship that I appreciate the most is the fact that my partner is for very short amounts of time, and I've had situations where folks just abandoned me, folks just left me, folks just didn't care about reciprocity or about how I was going to be affected. Just mindlessness. That was just so precarious and left me in such risky and unpredictable situations. When those things happen to you, when someone is genuinely trying to love you, it does not seem so, or possible at times. And I think the worst part is, like, most folks perhaps like that have been very open in trying to find someone to love them. So it's a very fucked up paradigm where you have had a past that was so traumatic that your future actually is in question because you don't really know how to process somebody loving you or someone caring for you, because you have been literally tricked, literally played, literally just not taken seriously or taken account of, people being mindless and careless with your life and with, like, things that are important, can kind of put you in a mentality where everything is temporary. So in ways, your reactions to things aren't with longevity in mind, aren't with some sort of progression in mind, some sort of relationship in mind. And I think in ways it creates a very harmful and toxic environment. And it's something that I think in ways, like, I for sure definitely need therapy for, and I definitely am hoping that I can find some sort of spiritual healing as well. But I think it's also important, like, pre any diagnosis or help or resources, I'm able to actually talk about it, because I think in this headspace that I'm in right now, it's so hard sometimes, because I'll be in the middle of being extremely upset about something that has really nothing to do with why I'm truly upset. And then a lot of times my anger is a mask for some sort of another black person who is woke and who is open to yelling and screaming and fighting about, not fighting, but, like, yelling and, like, being just very passionate and emphatic about the ways in which, like, we are oppressed and things are fucked up. And I appreciate that shit. I think I've never had a partnership with any person before that made me feel just so validated and just so heard. And that's something I so appreciate. But I think at the same time, because I've had so much trauma, because I've endured so many situations where I could not trust people that I had already trusted, I became hostile to people that cared for me because I just didn't believe them. Because I've had people be in my life for very short